Well, then we can get going. It is 7:04 and we'll call this Peaslee Building Committee meeting to order. Again, thank you so much to everyone who's here. And we heard from many friends. This was a coveted Tuesday in terms of meetings. So we've got a lot of friends who are with us in spirit, but on other meetings. Um, so we have Keith is going to go through our MSBA next steps. And spoiler alert, we have had a favorable outcome from the long-awaited MSBA board meeting. And so we'll go through all of that as part of today's meeting.
Erica, that was my big punchline. You blew
I
it.
know, I'm sorry. Yep, now everybody's just going to pick
Rework
up.
my whole thing
Yep,
now.
okay. Okay. Yep. Um, so we'll first move to approve the meeting minutes from January 7th. And I
I'll
would
make a motion.
motion.
I'll make a
Okay,
motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented. Like they look great.
thank you, Mitch. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tristan. Is there a possibility that we've omitted Scott Stockland in our ex officio members? I do see we've got Jason on there.
Yes, Scott. So the ex officio members present or listed there were appointed as such. Scott was not
Yeah.
appointed. He is simply a liaison, more of an informal
Okay,
position.
so we don't need him listed on our minutes.
Correct. We don't need him listed in attendance.
Okay. Any other discussion on minutes? In hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote of the voting members present. Greg is not present. I'm sorry. Mitch,
Aye.
Lauren,
Yes.
Tristan,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and Erica, yes. And our motion to approve the minutes carries. Okay. Now, Keith, this is your big moment. But we have our process update based on the MSBA board meeting. And before I launch you, I just want to say that we had a remarkable turnout. So from our town present, we had Greg as superintendent, Keith, we had Kelly on, we had Mitch join us, and also Stephanie, our town administrator, as well as myself. So I think it was a very robust, I was proud. It was a very robust turnout. And I also wanted to say the result of that meeting and that unanimous vote was, the efforts that took place before this committee even was assembled. So that's a big shout out to the team that worked with Greg, because it was quite a lot of paperwork, which was all submitted just the way it needed to be. So I just sincerely thank those individuals. All right, Keith, over to you.
Thank you, Erica, and I will share that back to the team that it did work hard on putting together all those preliminary documents for eligibility. You're right; it is no small task, but it's great to feel it's such a monumental step to get through eligibility and be welcomed into feasibility, which is part of Module 2 of MSBA's core building program. Which I'm pretty familiar with, as we are doing it in tandem over in Southborough for the Neary School, and having success as we go. So that obviously is informing kind of how we do, and certainly going to be making some improvements off of what we just recently did, and moving this forward. So as Erica mentioned, getting that vote to be eligible for feasibility is outstanding. It then allows the town of Northborough to engage in a feasibility study agreement, which Greg is going to be working on getting the proper signatures for. So that then would be technically the last step of Module 1, which then will open us up into Module 2, which is the forming of the team. And that Module 2, we did get training on that immediately following the meeting on last Wednesday afternoon. for about an hour or so. Us and a few other school districts were part of that training, going a lot over the X's and O's of what the requirements are, what the deliverables are, and kind of gave a little bit of a shadowing of what the potential timeline could be. So, one of the three main important parts of Module 2 are the forming of our project team, which includes the hiring of an owner's project manager who will work solely on our behalf, then going through the designer selection process. And then the third part of that is ensuring that we do have an MCPPO certified, that's a Massachusetts Certified Public Procurement Officer, on our team so that we can execute any of the procurements that are necessary. And for this group, Rebecca Pellegrino, our Assistant Superintendent of Finance, holds that in good standing, and she's a very good procurement officer. So this group is in very good hands. So those are the overview parts of what we've got ahead of us. Part of what I believe we got to do tonight, Erica, is to at least take steps towards forming the owner project manager selection committee, which can be a subset of this group. And that's something that I did participate on last time through the NARI project. And so in order to get to that point of an owner project manager, we go through a procurement process referred to as a request for services. It's a unique type of it's almost like a qualification based review of what OPMs would provide to us and making sure we're crossing every T and dotting every I, which the MSBA kind of lends out. So, that's one of the main important pieces, and we've got to start working on that document in preparation, for that process to occur. So that's a brief overview and a little more detail about OPM, but does anyone have any questions about that or any points they'd like me to clarify? Okay, good. And Tristan, have you experienced this before, this phase of the process?
Yeah, so I was on the construction manager's side on previous projects. So I was typically not I've worked with many OPMs. I've not procured an OPM, um, but it's a familiar process in terms of, requesting proposals, interviews, evaluating, and finding somebody who's going to best represent us, and they kind of function as an extension of us and do the daily in and out work. And so they are a very important part of the team and helping guide us along and make sure that the town gets what we want.
I think that's very well said. That's such a key part and a key partner for us. A lot of trust is going to reside in this firm to help us navigate every step and every misstep along the way, so we can get back on course. And they are also, should be and will be very in tune to the MSBA process, which is obviously very unique with checkpoints that are required and in ways of making it work, so we're not doing things 5 times over again. Doing it once, doing it well, getting the submissions in on time have been key to the NERI project, and I know will be important for this project as well. So yes, I think you said that very well.
Who actually puts together the package, the request for proposals? Is there a template that the town has used before? Does that come from the MSBA? Who kind of spearheads that and tailors it to this specific project?
Great question. So the request for services, there is a template that the MSBA provides, and then we do customize it. We can talk a little bit about the type of project we're looking for, and then we can really get into some of the qualifications we want this firm to have. It can really get down to the nitty gritty, and having experience doing it is only going to support that. So during the NERI building committee, there was a smaller group that did review that, and a lot of it was done with the support of Rebecca Pellegrino, the assistant superintendent, because of her MCPPO certification, as well as the chair, Jason Malinowski, They dove into that and wordsmithed it tremendously. But then there was an opportunity for review by the committee as a whole, just to ask questions, make sure we were, getting a lot of sets of eyes on it, because it is an important document that will
Hmm.
help frame the thing well. I will say, though, probably the most important part of the entire thing, and I believe everyone would agree with this, is the interview. When you really get a chance to talk to and understand their methodologies, some of their philosophies, it can really come out in an interview. Thoughtful questions are going to be important. Maybe throwing a curveball here and there to see how they would respond to different things that could occur during the process, I think would be a favorable approach, and really getting down into the nitty gritty of what they'd be able to provide. So to answer your question, there's definitely a template. We have the opportunity to customize, but then the other opportunity is really to dive into that interview process.
The one of the key parts of the RFS document is determining the scoring as to how we will rank the OPM applicants, both through the written submission process and the interview process. That's very important and often doesn't get enough discussion, before that goes out. I've been on committees where sometimes we regretted the numbers used there, and it kind of locks you down. Maybe, yeah, I mean, just not to provide anything specific, but for example, if we give too high a ranking to the written proposal and not enough on the interview, you can end up with somebody that does a great job with the written proposal, but once you meet them, you realize they're not a good fit, but they
Yeah.
ended up getting the higher score, and you have to hire them because you have to be objective with the scoring. So that's, from my perspective, that's one of the really important pieces that needs to get discussed. The otherwise the assemblage of the RFS is, it's mostly from a template, as Keith said, and I totally trust staff to fill in the blanks on on the details of the project and everything else.
Thank you.
Erica, just to let you be aware, Rob Tomasetti
Oh, thank you. Okay, good.
was able to join. I'm sorry, Rob, I didn't see you in the attendees. My apologies. I just promoted you.
Welcome, Rob. Thank you, Keith. Are there any other questions or comments specifically regarding the process?
Um, No, this phase is really not too MSBA heavy. I think that's the other thing that I would comment on. This is more about kind of framing how we want to do it. We're using the resources of MSBA to create documents. So it is one of the first times where we can actually get hands-on with some of the stuff that we're trying to create and make sure we're, telling the right story of the Peaslee School, framing out the different things that we want explored when we're really reviewing the options. Some things that might be on the table, off the table, is obviously going to be part of that unpacking, and then really giving that OPM the opportunity to explore that deeper and know more about what we really want to achieve. So this is, I think, the first step of really getting into the weeds a little bit and talking about the things that we want, and then obviously coming out with it with a partner that will genuinely, help lead that mission. And we're going to rely on that OPM heavily throughout the process. So it is a key step, and it's not one to shortchange, as Mitch alluded to.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome, Rob. We see you now. Can you hear us?
Yeah, apologies,
Okay.
guys. That link was that didn't work for me for a solid 10 minutes.
Oh,
So
no.
I have heard the entire meeting.
Oh,
So
good. Okay.
discussing
Excellent.
the kind of a subcommittee for choosing an OPM. So
Yes.
definitely
Yep.
Tristan's on the right path, and I think we all are.
So our agenda item number 4 is in fact the owner's project manager selection committee discussion. And as everybody alluded to, we received an 83-page document of guidance from MSBA that said, here's your template. It's customizable, but not too customizable. So some of it is administrative, but part of what we need to do is form our selection committee for OPM. So I'd like to open this portion of the agenda up for a conversation about how we want to, part of that 83-page document specified the criteria for the selection committee. And you've heard some folks already here say that that could be a subset of our committee. It might involve some others that we bring on strategically. So I'd like to open it up and have a conversation about what this group would like to do in terms of the OPM selection committee. And before I open it up, I just want to remind folks that this selection committee will be conducting interviews and will be involved with creating the rubric upon which the interviews are scored. And then the score sheet, which is also provided by MSBA, is completed and submitted. Our feedback is submitted to MSBA so that they make the decision with us. So, so this committee would be the selection committee would have a series of meetings which would involve the interviews, prepping for the interviews, and then conducting the interviews, and then debriefing from the interviews, and ultimately making a selection that goes to MSBA. So that being said, I would welcome feedback about the thoughts of this group about who to include on the OPM selection committee. Mitch?
Thanks, Erica. I mentioned this via email to Erica that I think it's a good idea to start with just a mirror of the entire committee, other than anyone that might not want to participate. This is the first time that we as a body get a chance to really dive in and do some serious work. I think it's a good idea for us to just work together on that. And it's also, to some extent, it's the biggest decision that we make because we actually don't choose the architect. The MSBA chooses the architect, but we choose the OPM, and the OPM is the closest relationship that we have throughout really the entire process. So, I just think it's a good starting point, at least, if somebody doesn't have the time or is concerned about a conflict of interest or anything else, I don't have any problem if they step aside for this process. But other than that, I think we're a good group and we can get it done.
Thank you, Mitch. What other feedback is there?
So I was just going to suggest, kind of similar to Mitch, or question, if even if there's maybe a smaller subset that actually dives into preparing the request that goes out, it seems to me that a decision of this importance probably should come back to the bigger committee when we actually make the final selection. And maybe there's, kind of a working group that helps, lay the groundwork and get everything ready. But the final, review is, I think that probably belongs with the committee.
Thank you, Tristan. Other feedback? Kevin?
Yeah, I would, I totally agree with Mitch and Tristan. I think this is why we're all here, is to contribute and make an impact and participate. So I'm ready to help and excited to participate.
Thank you. Lauren?
I would like to know a little bit more about the timing for some of this work, because I just think that, some of us who maybe can't take work off may have to remove ourselves from this portion.
Erica, I can comment on that a little bit, although there's a lot of, so the way I understand it is that the OPM review panel that MSBA puts on has a series of meetings, and the ones that were brought up last week as part of the training were over the summer. I think there was one in June, July, August, and I don't think they said anything beyond that. So the latest that I had talked to Greg about, and this was very quick and in passing, is that there is no real rush to do it in June. Like there really isn't any tremendous benefit because then the process still has to wait until you get to certain points. But the cadence of it has to be decent so that when we need to, we got to be thoughtful about the planning about when town meetings occur for certain larger votes to occur. So that's the kind of cycle to keep in mind because you never want to have, and I bet Mitch would attest to this, we don't want to have a special town meeting for one single topic. We want to make sure that we have it in a way to do it so that it works with what the town needs. However, when it gets to the big vote, that will obviously be probably its own special town meeting. So there's just a few things to consider with the cadence. So when I talked to Greg about it, there was no rush to get things done now for a June, and that he had commented very quickly about maybe targeting something that would be later in the summer, perhaps August or even September, so that we had enough time to really build it.
And I'll just say, so in between that date of the summer, is the MSBA's OPM panel.
Right.
So we would seek to attend one of their panels, and that their recommendation, their suggestion is that when we have accomplished our interviews, that we might be ready if we fall in sync with similar projects. We might be ready for the June 2, July 7, or August 4 meeting. So that means, and this is to your question, Lauren, what happens between now and then? So we may have a 2-week period where we have our interviews set up. For others who've recently conducted those interviews, was it did you find most firms were able to accommodate like within a 2-week period?
When we did, well, the unique part of when we did it for NERI is we did it all over and around July 4th of 2 years ago, and that was tricky and complicated. And people did have to make significant sacrifices with their planning to make sure they were available. So we had what MSBA needed in order to make that meeting. That was right after July 4th. I want to even say it was July 7th, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of pieces had to align for that. And I think that coupled with the end of school made it a little bit tricky. But then now we're talking about the summer. So that's also a layer of it that's a little tricky with how to plan this out. I think the firms were to answer your question though, Erica. I think the firms were very responsive. I didn't think that they know that these are coming. They're familiar with all the districts that are welcomed into it, and they seek this work. So they are preparing. They know when these meetings are, so they make teams available to participate as needed.
Yes, Tristan.
Just a kind of a question on overview of the steps and working back. If we work backwards from, let's go forward. So we're gonna prepare the documents, the request for proposal. Firms will submit their proposals. We will interview. We will make a selection and a recommendation. Then we go to the MSBA meeting over the summer.
Correct.
Correct.
And then the next stop is town meeting to approve a contract.
No, we do not need the town meeting for contract. That's something that can be done by the committee.
Okay.
And I
Yeah,
would
we
just
already have funding for feasibility, and that's the only thing that town meeting needed to approve. The next time we go to town meeting will likely be after we complete feasibility and schematic design. Probably just I forget what's feasibility. I think it's feasibility and schematic design. We have then we know how much the project will cost, and then we go forward to town meeting for the big number. And that's should be the only other town meeting article we need.
That's correct.
So really our end date that we're looking towards right now is which MSBA meeting that we're targeting to be prepared for.
Correct.
correct. And there's one more item I would add, which is, placing ads too. We have a certain deadline by which we must place an ad, but your timeline of items you just named off is what needs to happen between now and then. And again, that June 2, July 7, August 4, those were the dates that MSBA referenced on our behalf that they thought would be reasonable targets based on similar projects timelines. So those were not, those were dates that were suggested to us.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank
And
you.
only two groups approaching at a particular time.
Yeah.
So that we will, and there were other projects in the queue as well. So what I heard on this agenda item was a pretty robust consensus that the group would like to be involved holistically in this process. Some questions about what the allocation of time would be. And so my feedback on that is that we would work to be as efficient as possible with people's time, that as we set up these interviews, that they would be at times that work for folks and we're not spreading it out over weeks and weeks, that we can conduct our interviews and then have our debriefing meetings. Anything further to add in terms of the OPM selection committee specifically? And just a note that we do need to include Rebecca, correct? She would be part of our OPM selection committee.
She would, yes.
Yes. Okay. So she would be invited in and we'd schedule with her as well.
Yeah, and
Erica,
she'd be a non-voting member.
A non-voting
because-
member, but she
yeah,
would be
yeah.
required. Her presence would be required at that point.
Yeah, we need an MCCPO. So she, or in theory, Steph Bacon is also one, but we should be consistent and use Becky as much as possible.
Lauren, I heard your voice.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Would there be any reason why we could not all be part of this selection committee? Do you see any logistical reason or like legal reason?
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And we did ask MSBA, the question was asked, and if there was any guidance regarding the number of people, and they said it's really at our discretion, is kind of the feedback that we got. Well, thank you for that. I heard that consensus. So at this time, we move on to any new business. If the committee members at this time have any questions or clarification, I will go to Kevin first.
Sorry, Erica, just one more question on the
Yeah.
selection process. I
Yes.
wonder, to avoid the summer mess and people, the challenges of vacation planning and things like that, would it be reasonable that we target the June 2nd date? Is that something we can put our name in now that we're targeting that date and just all work toward that with the schedule?
That's an option, and I think it depends on if we can meet, there are certain deadlines we have to meet in order to be first out of the gate for June. So I think it's kind of, I would say the answer to that is probably on the administrative team that's putting together the packet.
Right. And Kevin, I think the only thing that I would add is that then it doesn't give us that additional month of June, and hopefully we don't have any snow days. So as school comes to a close, we do have those 2 weeks that open up towards the end of June that typically people are more available, and before people disappear for their summer plans. I think one of the, and we can also make the timeline for the selection as quick as we're able to, but then not have the pressure of that meeting over our heads. So we could complete the process in early June, but then just not be on MSBA's agenda until July, let's say. And then we don't all have to participate in that meeting, and people can be in Barbados. So that's
Right.
not an issue. So I think one thing I felt last time we did that is I think we waited a little too long to really get the process started, and then that's why we got hung up and that we were taking care of things over the 4th of July holiday, which was not preferred. So I think if we do front load things a little bit and then but give us an opportunity to land on it, especially if we're doing it as a complete group, a little more flexibility there might be beneficial.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So maybe the consensus, I mean, maybe we're targeting then that our interviews and our debrief meetings and scoring meetings could be complete in the month, within the month of June. And then when the meeting, if we hit the July or August meeting, that's great. Um, but our meetings should be complete within the month of June.
Mhm.
So then we're not doing this heavy scheduling for interviews right in the peak vacation. Okay. Any other feedback or new business at this time? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to, before I adjourn, I just want to remind folks of our upcoming meetings. And it is a little bit of rapid fire at this point, but they are virtual. So we'll move efficiently, and this is kind of our big launch phase. So we have a meeting in 2 weeks, and the 18th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. And then we have a no joke meeting on April Fool's Day at 7 p.m. on Zoom. It's real. It's happening. And I just to think ahead a little bit is, one of the limited customizable sections are of our request for services document is a little bit of the background that the OPM will need to understand about our town and our vision, and our educational needs. And every one of you has been selected on this committee because you bring valuable insight and background on that. So when it comes time to read that document, and I believe we can collaborate with some of the material that's already been generated from previous studies that have taken place that we've circulated within this group. But once that's done, I really would appreciate a critical read in offering your insights, because that's what we present to the OPM so that they can best service us. So thank you, everyone. If there's no more feedback, it is 7:35.
Actually, I do have a
Yes,
question,
Mitch.
Erica. What is
Yes.
the purpose of those next two meetings, or are those now going to be used for OPM selection committee work?
So we will review, I think offline with Greg's team and Stephanie, we will work on the letter that goes out, the RFS template. And I would like this team to look at that template if possible. We'll place an ad. But are you thinking that, what are you thinking in terms of meetings?
Yeah, my question was that there's not a lot of work that the committee has to do right now other than this OPM work.
Yep.
So I wasn't sure whether you had planned those next two meetings to be for that OPM work or for something else.
Yeah, so those meetings would be focused around getting the document out. Our next steps
Great.
would be document and then placing that ad.
Yep. Perfect. That's great.
Yeah. And yes, Tristan?
Just in that same vein, I was going to ask who's currently carrying the torch for the next steps? Is that administrative folks are going to work on the draft of the document and ask, the committee members for our input and our vision, and then at our next meetings, we will kind of go through that and hone that document. Is that the general flow of things?
Yes, and this, as I understand it, is a dance between our town administration and our, Greg's staff, so that we can work together, because a lot of it is just filling in the correct information that exists within past archives and documents. But this team needs to look, I would like this team to look at the background and sort of the statement of intent for the town, because it represents us.
Will someone
Yeah.
send that around and distribute that to the team so we can see kind of the format and what the questions are so that we can work on a response for that?
Yes.
So,
Okay.
Erica,
Yep,
what we
we
can
did.
do is you and I can regroup with Greg and make
Yep.
sure that we have the library of documents that you would want the team to have, and then make sure it's available and shareable. So, Tristan, yeah, I'll work with Erica to make sure we're getting what's needed for the team to review.
Thank you, everyone. So it's 7:37, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Mitch. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lauren. And then I'll any further discussion? All right, and then we'll take a vote on adjourning. Mitch,
Aye.
Lauren,
Yes.
Tristan,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and Erica, yes. Thank you again all for your, oh, bye, little one. Thank you again for your participation. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Erica. Thanks, Keith. Bye, everybody.